Legacy can be such a loaded term, right? I work with a lot of leaders, and some of the things that they have in common is this desire to leave a legacy. And we can look at it in so many different ways. Is it your family? Is it your work? Is it just how you are? And I think for me personally, I just want to have evidence that I've made an impact.
Mhm.
And so what that looks like, I've tried not to overly prescribe, but it does help me just try to show up and just be useful every time
Yeah.
I'm showing up. And that's
Mhm.
about all I can control is how I'm showing up as opposed to what other people are doing. And hopefully you show up enough
Yep.
and you can make an impact on somebody.
Welcome to Oh Shit, I'm Dead, the Legacy Podcast, the show where we ask the big question: what will they say about you when you're gone? Each week, we sit down with icons, trailblazers, and legends in the making to dive into their stories, scandals, and the legacies they're leaving behind. And now, here's your host, the video godfather himself, Lou Bortone.
Hey, welcome back to Oh Shit, I'm Dead, the Legacy Podcast. My guest today is a great longtime friend and colleague, Darcy Eikenberg. Thanks for being here, Darcy.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. And I am glad that you're not dead.
Not yet. But again, we've been talking to a lot of folks, not so much about death, but okay, what can we do while we're still here to make an impact, to make a difference? And I love the work you do. I love the Red Cape Revolution, the book. We can talk a little bit about that. But how do you, when somebody says to you, what will be your legacy? What does that image or what does that term bring up for you?
Yeah, legacy can be such a loaded term, right? I work with a lot of leaders, and some of the things that they have in common is this desire to leave a legacy. And we can look at it in so many different ways. Is it your family? Is it your work? Is it just how you are? And I think for me personally, I just want to have evidence that I've made an impact.
Mhm.
And so what that looks like, I've tried not to overly prescribe, but it does help me just try to show up and just be useful every time I'm
Yeah.
showing up. And that's
Mhm.
about all I can control is how I'm showing up as opposed to what other people are doing. And hopefully you show up enough
Yeah.
and you can make an impact on somebody.
And your book is called Red Cape Revolution. Can you tell folks who may not be familiar with it what that's all about and how it came about?
Yeah, Red Cape Revolution is my company name, and Red Cape
Mhm.
Rescue is the book, but the
Right. That's
subtitle is really the kicker. It's Save Your Career Without Leaving Your Job. And this came up from a lot of the work that I've done with, people at different spectrums of their career where they hit a road bump. They
yeah.
think, oh my gosh, I have to leave. It's gotten awful here. It's usually some kind of catalyst moment, right? And
Mhm.
it might be hitting a birthday with a big number on the end, with a 0
Yeah.
or a 5 on the end, and starting to think about what's next. Am I actually living the life that I want to live? But in our society, we're so trained that when something's wrong in our job, we say, let's go find another job. But
Yeah.
that is so fraught with
Mhm.
difficulty and challenges. And what I kept seeing over and over is people thinking that's the answer. And then they would get discouraged and worn down and then say, oh, I guess I should just stay stuck. I guess I should just settle for where I am. And that's not
Mhm.
the answer either, because there's no better way to waste your valuable life than to stay stuck in an opportunity that you aren't feeling good about. So my book goes through the things that you actually control in your career. And there's really only 3 things, and within each of the 3 things, there are 5 different ways that you can take control. And so it's really meant for anybody who, feeling like they've hit a roadblock or
Mhm.
is anticipating they might. It's not necessarily for people who absolutely know they uh, want to leave or don't want to leave. It's really a guide for all of us.
Interesting. Yeah. And I was talking to another colleague of ours on the podcast, Kat O'Sullivan, and she talks about living your legacy. And what she was saying was that it took COVID to really have everything pause and reassess. I'm sure it's probably the same with the job. You don't need to have an event like COVID, but at what point or how do you stop and reflect? Is this what I want to be doing, or is this job salvageable, or can I turn this into something I love?
Yeah. My perspective is that COVID made it almost politically correct to stop and reflect. I think there was a
Yeah.
whole lot of reflection that was going on in the world
Mm.
long leading up to COVID. But COVID, it's like when you boil down a sauce to its
Yeah.
essence. COVID put a focus on it, made it rich and visible. And so lots of people who wouldn't be the kind of people who might be talking about taking a step back or reflecting or thinking about their legacy, we're now given permission and language to talk about it more. So I think
Mm.
that's what makes it feel like it was COVID, but I am not convinced that was the reason. I think it is the reason. I think some of the reasons are that it's a natural human evolution in our life to question
Mhm.
where we are, what have we done, where are we going. This is what defines the human brain from other brains, right? That we
Right.
can observe and rationalize and interpret. And then I think the evolution of these things are just having access to more things happening and more comparators gets us frustrated of, I don't have that. Our grandparents were probably a full lot more content with their lives because all they knew is what they could see and touch.
Mhm.
But we are exposed to a lot more, which triggers the brain of what are we lacking as opposed to being grateful for what we have. I think that then in a lot of organizations and people who are working in, and I primarily work with people in traditional corporate organizations,
Right.
um, we're able to maybe look around a little bit. When something changes, you get out of your habit, right? You get out of
Right.
your mindlessness and you say, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Or how are we doing this?
Mhm.
And I would observe that there was so much sprint energy early in COVID. It was just make it work, do what we need to do, take care of
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
But after a while, you can't keep sprint energy in a marathon world. I think the past, year or so, and even continuing to today, we're getting to that next level of reflection and asking people, hey, what is it that I want? Because am I still
Right.
sprinting when it's a marathon? What do I want for the marathon? And that's where like, taking the time to pause, really getting clear on who you are and what you want is critically important. And it's part of the work that I do as a professional
Yeah.
coach and helping guide people through that.
So are you like finding CEOs or CFOs in a not necessarily a crisis moment, but like an aha, like, oh wait, maybe I should be doing such and such.
I think that a lot of folks that are in the highest levels of organizations, there's a couple different themes that I see. I see some are so focused on what's the short-term result that I need to create that there's
Right.
not space for the longer term thinking. But I
Hmm.
think it is that next tier, that leader of leaders, that is an area that I've been doing some research in and very interested in because they're seeing maybe a broader 360 view. They want to get to whatever the result needs to be, whatever the win looks like.
Yeah.
And they know it has to be done in a way that can be sustainable through people, that we've got to
Mhm.
do it in a way that we keep our good people, we keep our good relationships with others, with vendors, with contractors, just the wild way the world works today.
Yeah.
But it's a pressure, right? It's a pressure of um we can't always have everything. And
Yeah.
so where do things shift and where do we give? And then one of the things I always talk about with my clients, because I think if you are not getting what you need, you
Hmm.
can't bring the gifts that you have. So I often will create the opportunity for people to be a little selfish. And I don't mean that in
Yeah.
a take away something me, but to say, "Hey, I know I'm really good at building relationships. How
Yeah.
can the work that I do really double down on that gift that I have for the organization?" And we
Yeah.
think that these jobs are in these tight little boxes. Every role, even at the highest levels, it's all made up every single day. So
Yeah.
helping people recognize that can help them also recreate the job, even the job that they actually still have,
Mhm.
into more of the job that's going to feed their legacy, that's going to feed what they want long term, and
Yeah.
still help the company and the people around them be able to thrive in our
Hmm.
world of work.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the social media, there's a lot more FOMO than, like you said, our grandparents didn't have a fear of missing out. They just did what they did. And now we're all looking, oh, wait, Darcy's on Facebook and she did this. I need to check.
I was just talking to a senior leader at a large pharma organization just right before we jumped on this call.
Mhm.
And the conversation that we've probably had a few times is what to say no to.
Right.
Because there's a million things to say yes to, even if
Mhm.
you only look in your own organization, but the muscle to build to make sure that you're really hyper focused in where you can make a difference is
Yeah.
what do you say no to?
Yeah. That's a biggie. And I've had issues with that in the past about boundaries. And suddenly you say yes a few too many times and you're like, what the hell am I doing? And it's like on when you're flying, they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on first because you got to take care of you if you're going to take care of everybody else.
That's right. And they a lot of the people that you talk to, the people that we have in common, they're really smart, capable people. I think there's
Mhm.
a lot of smart, capable people in the world. The challenge is if we're not starting with that self-awareness, if we don't really know where is our best and highest use, what are those types
Mhm.
of things? It's easy to say yes because we can do a lot of things. But
Yeah.
but everything, our time doesn't expand to match it.
Mhm.
It takes away some level of focus and also your level of time for you just to be in thought and to be thinking
Right.
about, am I on track? Am I leaving the legacy I want to leave? Or what are the actions that I need to take to level up and feel like I'm doing what I'm put on earth to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Really good point. So I know you work with a lot of corporations and companies, and I'm curious because what I realized that my son said he's been at work at Deloitte for 4 years. My daughter's been out of college for 4 years. They've never worked in an office
Mhm.
ever.
Mhm.
So do you find that remote work, or how does the C-suite kind of think in terms about that flexibility? Because a lot of times now, like my son and daughter's generation, they're twins, so they've both been working for a few years, never worked in an office.
Mhm.
And when they look at job opportunities, they want to know, I don't want to go into an office, or maybe they're missing out because they're not going to an office. You weren't have the experience of your boss throwing something at you like I did 3 years.
Let's hope every office situation isn't like that. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
the whole to office, not to office piece is a mess right now. And so, what I say to companies who are wrestling with this and the leaders who are having to make decisions, what I think is happening a lot of times is they're making black and white decisions because that is easier to communicate. It
Right.
is easier, even if it might not be the best business decision, but it is easier to communicate and to be on with. But the data is clearly saying that being able to have some flexibility of hybrid work from home, work from anywhere can actually be very productive in many situations. The
Yeah.
question don't hear as many people talking about yet is what is productive? Because in
Right.
today's world, so your son working at Deloitte, he's
Mhm.
not making widgets. He's not creating stuff every day that checks off a list. He's in conversation. He's in thought. He's developing things that come out of conversations. There is some argument for that kind of work that being able to do that um, where people are with you to be able to get input, get answers faster. I have a client who's the head of a advertising agency. They
Mhm.
obviously had gone remote. And had decided they would give up their very expensive space and
Yeah.
be totally remote, but now are finding that they're getting things are taking longer to get done because of the
Mhm.
asynchronous model, as opposed to if were doing the same thing and we were in a physical location,
Yeah.
would we just say, Lou, what's your thought? Darcy, what's your thought? Okay, we're going to decide, move on, which is
Right.
just harder to do. We've got great tools, but we haven't always made rules about how we're using the tools. To me, I think first of all, I do think that as a younger person, younger career professional, you have to be with people because all work is about people.
Yeah.
Even a computer programmer, we have a mutual friend, Tom Hendrickson, who,
Mhm.
coaches technical people on
Yeah.
dealing with people, right? Um, because that is always going to be how success happens, even if you don't think it's your job. So I would also encourage anybody who is resistant to go to an office or saying, I will never do that, to recognize that's also the lizard brain talking.
Right.
Our amygdala, the primate part of our brain,
Yeah.
wants to keep us safe,
Mhm.
wants to keep us hidden and inside. And it's uncomfortable to get dressed, to drive into an office, to do whatever, right? But the clients that I've had who have experimented and had the fortune to be able to say, hey, I actually do live near one of our
Mhm.
offices. It actually could be helpful to shift my mind out of my just behind my computer, getting rid of some people. And they found it very valuable. I've had others who have tried that and then they go to the office and nobody's there. They're sitting behind their computer all day, just in
Yeah.
another location.
Yep.
I really think it has to be custom for you, but I would encourage people who have never done it, if the
Mm.
opportunity arises, to treat it like an experiment, to say, okay, let's take a look at this.
Mhm.
And because it is a different way of learning, I think it's an accelerant to learning. I don't think it's necessarily a detriment if you only are working remote, but we are now seeing generations like your kids
27-year-old.
who they're not kids anymore. They're young
Yeah.
adults who have never experienced those kind of offices. And maybe they will create their own networks or other ways that they can connect. But what we don't want is to have people increasingly be lonely and out on their own and feel
Yeah.
like all work is transactional done on the computer.
Yeah, exactly. And I like what you said about the black and white thing, because I think there's a knee-jerk reaction like, okay, everybody back to work, back to the office. I don't care what you do. I don't care what your role is. Just come back.
The harder things are always the nuanced things, right? It is easy to make a proclamation. It is easy to say this is, but that is not how the world works. And quite honestly, even so, there's one very large organization that I worked with some of their leaders on, and they have made a proclamation back to the office. But when you go into some of their next levels and talk with some of their other people, there are a million workarounds, right?
Yeah.
So it's your company is probably compromising for the business already, is
Yeah.
right sizing to what happens. It's just be in integrity, have a process and a plan, and give your managers, give your leaders of different departments, what is the flexibility? What is the goal they're going for? The goal is
Yeah.
not let's fill up office space unless you are a commercial real estate seller who needs to demonstrate that we have
Yeah.
full office space. But that is
Hmm.
typically not the goal of most businesses.
Right.
What's the goal?
Hmm. Yeah. I love that. Before we wrap up, I want to come back to legacy. And in terms of, I like to ask folks I speak with, I know I want to be remembered for what I do now, but how do you want to be remembered in terms of the work that you're doing?
Yeah. For me, my hope is that I can show people that sometimes the way they're thinking isn't the truth. You can choose your thought. I mentioned the three things that you control.
Mhm.
You control what you say, what you do, and what you think. And that's all. And there's actually a new book that just came out from Ethan Kross that he referenced data that more than, I think it's 70% of people don't think they can control their emotions or have no control over their emotions. But our
Yeah.
thoughts create our emotions, which create our actions. And
Yeah.
so I get to choose. I may not be able to control in terms of push down things that I'm feeling, but I get to choose, am I
Mhm.
gonna be kind to you today, or am I gonna
Yep.
be mean to you? Or but we give up our power to
Yeah.
actively choose. So I think the more people that hear that from me or other sources and try that on to create their own better life, not in
Mhm.
Pollyanna toxic positivity, but just the truth about their life. Because I think
Yeah.
most of us think we're a whole lot worse than we are. And I think we're a whole lot better than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. For some reason, I woke up this morning and the Abe Lincoln quote was in my head, like, people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be.
And then and it is the truth, right? We have control over our thoughts. When I get arguments on that, I'll often say, you might have two competing thoughts, but which one is going to move you forward? If I could say, I look awful in blue today versus, hey, the blue looks fine.
Mhm.
Um, which one is going to make me show up here and have a great conversation with you versus
Yeah.
being self-conscious or hating how I look or fussing with myself in the camera?
Yeah.
Choose the thought that works for you.
Awesome. That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much. And tell folks where they can find your book, your website.
Sure, you can come on over to redcaperevolution.com, and the book Red Cape Rescue, Save Your Career Without Leaving Your Job is available on Amazon and all online booksellers.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much, Darcy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching. Oh Shit, I'm Dead, the Legacy Podcast. Please subscribe and tell your friends about the podcast, and do it now while you're still alive and kicking. Check out other episodes at ohshitimdead.com.